Hi, my name is Frederick, and do you really need 10 gigabit Ethernet? Let's find out right after the intro. Before we start, I like to say that all the equipment in this video is bought by myself. I wasn't sponsored by anybody, and this is my own opinion. Right, so this video also has like two segments. In the first segment, I will be talking about my personal history in post-production and how I actually decided on getting faster networking. And in the second part, I will be showing how I am installing my new network in my cabinet downstairs. Another thing I like to say is that during the video, while I was recording, I noticed that I mentioned the Ubiquiti Dream Machine Special Edition quite often, but I do call it Second Edition, which obviously is a mistake. Whenever you hear me say Second Edition, it means Special Edition. All right, now let's get going. So as a visual effects artist and a video editor, having good networking is rather important because we move a lot of video files all the time. Now, back in the days when I started out with being a freelance, I had only one machine. It was an Intel Xeon machine with a graphics card, 3D graphics card from NVIDIA, and I put in a RAID 0 for fast disk access. But at that time I was only doing 3D animation, I was working with Maya. So after a couple of years I noticed that it was hard to find enough 3D related jobs. So I retrained myself to be a video editor. And I did that by shooting my own short and then edit it. So for that project I got myself a Mac Pro from 2008 and I used Final Cut Pro to edit the short. So to have some fast editing, I also needed a RAID 0 in my Mac Pro, which was possible because it had enough bass. But I started noticing by having two machines that it became a little bit harder to have the two machines stuck to each other because I didn't have any centralized place to put all my video files and all my 3D files. So at some point I did buy a NAS, but that gave me some issues because the networking was rather slow. So I started keeping all the projects for 3D on my PC and all the video projects on my Mac Pro. Obviously I could connect my PC to my Mac Pro, but the process was a little bit tedious. I had to install certain drivers. And yeah, so it worked, but it wasn't really nice. It was cumbersome. So several years later, I started upgrading PC. I've replaced the Mac Pro with the iMac 27-inch from 2015, and that was my new editing setup. But the iMac doesn't have internal storage, or doesn't have a lot of internal storage. It did have the SSD inside, which is rather fast, and you could edit from that no problems. But it wasn't that big, and I decided to get external storage, which I did with a MyBook Pro from Western Digital. That is like a small, you could say it's a NAS, but it isn't because it's direct attached storage. It's not network attached storage. So it was connected with Thunderbolt 2, but it could have two drives in it. I could put them in RAID 0, and I did have a reasonable throughput for video editing, which was 180 megabytes per second. That's enough for doing 720p videos, full HD videos. But when I started to do 4K videos, I noticed that started to be an issue. So I started looking into solutions where I could have faster disk access, and I stumbled onto SSDs. Now, in the beginning, SSDs were rather expensive, but over time they got cheaper, and I started editing my videos from the SSDs directly connected to the iMac. That worked really well, but for data management that wasn't ideal because SSDs were expensive for the size you got, and I still used regular hard drives to store my big projects and archive them. So having a lot of small SSDs lying around and having to copy over everything to archive wasn't that all convenient. And I started looking into better network solutions. Now, at that time, 1 gigabit Ethernet was still mainstream, and I'm talking about 2017, 2018, and 10 gigabit was definitely around, but it was still super expensive. And, I have a home office and I don't have unlimited budgets, so for me, it was kind of out of my range, and I kind of let it go for a while. But last year, I started looking into this network thing again, and especially for centralized storage, because my MacBook Pro, which is only 6 terabytes, started to fill up. I didn't have enough space anymore, and I needed to expand. So I was looking again into NASes, and for me, I kind of had a feeling that I wanted to work with Synology. Obviously, you have a lot of different brands. So yeah, I decided to get myself a 1522 Plus and an extra module for 10 gigabit. Now that's nice, but the rest of my network wasn't 10 gigabit at all. So yeah, there was not a real benefit. And I could use link aggregation on the 1 gigabit ports, but for video editing, that is kind of useless because my machine that I edit on is only one connection. It doesn't have two connections for link aggregation. And usually with video editing, you get like one stream of data, which doesn't get split up over several cables. So I needed like a device, a module that I could connect up to my iMac and then augment its speed. So I got myself a QNAP external 10 gigabit connector, and that is a Thunderbolt 3 module, and I had Thunderbolt 2 on my iMac, so I connected that up with this special cable that you could connect Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 3 devices. But I hit a snag really quickly because Thunderbolt 2 doesn't support power over the connection, and Thunderbolt 3 does. So the power delivery for the QNAP device needed to come from a Thunderbolt 3 connection, and the Thunderbolt 2 doesn't provide that. So that didn't work at all. Now, I do have a MacBook Pro as well, and the 10 gigabit connection works with that, but I'm not using that much for editing because it has a smaller screen, and yeah, I prefer to still work with my slightly older iMac. So at that point, I was starting to look into other solutions again, and one of the things was that I would upgrade like my whole network, then have my PC, which is 2.5 gigabit, connected to the network, have the MacBook Pro connected to the network, and have a cheaper 2.5 gigabit connection from the iMac onto the network as well. And that is with a USB-A connector, which is USB 3.0. Okay, so keeping that in mind that it's only 2.5 gigabits, I still wanted to have something that was a little bit future-proof, and I already had a 10 gigabit machine, the Synology NAS. So I decided that I would be looking into 10 gigabit devices or switches. Now, a while back, I did get my first Ubiquiti switch, which is a PoE switch, and which I use for delivering power to my access points, and I use also a Raspberry Pi to use Unify to control those devices. And naturally, when you already have a certain brand, I started looking into that brand again, and for me those brands were Zyxel. Because I have a universal gateway from Zyxel, I have a HP switch, so I was looking into HP, and I looked into Ubiquiti because I already had a Ubiquiti switch as well. Now, when looking at all the stuff, I think Zyxel was possibly a good choice, but I kind of felt, because my universal gateway was already a little bit older, no firmware upgrades, that going with Zyxel, I had to replace everything anyway. So when looking into Ubiquiti, I thought that might have been, the good combination, especially when they came out with the Dream Machine, which is a universal gateway. It has the controller built in for all unified products. And it also has some PoE capabilities when you take the special edition. So for me, that seemed like a good solution, and I started looking into 10 gigabit switches from Ubiquiti. Now, the first time I looked, which was like 2 years ago, I don't think there was a good solution for 10 gigabits. There was also no good solution for 2.5 gigabit, but a year later, those devices came available. I'm not sure anymore how I found these devices, but I kind of remember, and maybe it was wrong, maybe they were available or they were too expensive, I can't remember exactly, but at some point I saw that 10 gigabit was actually affordable, was also a unified solution, and could integrate with the whole thing. So that's what I have decided. I didn't pick HP anymore or Zeisel, but I actually went for Ubiquiti. So in the next part of this video, I will be showing you how I'm installing this equipment. So there's a Dream Machine involved, there's a 24 port 10 gigabit switch involved, and I will be setting it up. Now I'm not running through the whole Unify thing, but you can find stuff online how you have to configure your network. But yeah, I'll show you how my cabinet is set up and how I connect every device to it. So that brings us to the second part of the video, and we're going down to the basement. We're going to uninstall the current network and upgrade it to all the new equipment. See you downstairs. So before I start upgrading my cabinet, I want to show you around what's inside at this moment. And you will see it's equipment that is 5 to 10 years old, so it has been here for a while. It has always served me well, but it's time to upgrade. So at the top we see two Cat 6a rated patch panels. They serve as the main connection to all the sockets in the house and into the garden shed. Underneath there's the Zeisel Zywall USG50, which is a security gateway. It is a router and firewall, so it manages all the traffic that comes in from the internet and blocks or allows certain traffic. Then there's the HP 1810 48G switch, and it's a gigabit switch. It has always been the backbone of my network. As you can see, there's a lot of cabling connected into the sockets, but only half of them are lit up. So a couple of them are just there for conveniency, that they are connected to certain sockets in the house, but they are not in use at the moment. Underneath there is the Supermicro Intel Atom-based 32-bit server. So it is an older server and it's not even 64-bit. So that will be replaced as well. It was really nice because it's low powered. It's one of the first servers that were really like 20 watts or something like that, instead of the hundreds watts of that servers usually need to run. And it has served me well, but it was just a really big disk with a web server on it and storage capacity for family stuff like photographs and videos. Underneath there is the first Ubiquiti equipment that I ever bought, which is a 16-port PoE Plus switch. It serves as a power supply for my 3 access points in the house, also from Ubiquiti, and it is also connected with the Raspberry Pi underneath there, which has the controller software on it. And as you can see, the Raspberry Pi has a PoE hat, which means that it's also been powered by the PoE switch. And the controller software, the Unify controller software, that is, serves as a controller for all the equipment from Ubiquiti. I find this very convenient because then everything is in one place. And underneath there is the modem, which is just a bridge for my internet provider and my Zywall USG50. So as you can see, most of my equipment is already there for quite a bit of years. And even HP doesn't make switches anymore. It's now rebranded to Aruba. So yeah, it's time to do an upgrade, I think. And everything in the cabinet is like rated for 1 gigabit. And I will be upgrading to a 10 gigabit backbone. Although my firewall is not exactly obsolete, it doesn't get any more updates, and it's also about 10 years old. And that's why I prefer to upgrade to the Dream Machine 2nd edition. On top of that, the Dream Machine has the built-in controller for all the Ubiquiti equipment that I have, and that way I can get rid of the Raspberry Pi and repurpose that little computer. What you haven't seen is the Synology 1522 Plus, which is in the back of the cabinet, but it's a desktop solution, so it sits on a shelf. And currently it's connected with a 1 gigabit connection to the switch, and I also have a 10 gigabit connection straight into the patch panel, so a machine upstairs can use 10 gigabit if needed, for editing video, for example. I like to have a 10 gigabit backbone of my whole system, so the HP switch will be replaced by the Ubiquiti 10 gigabit switch. That way the Synology NAS can be connected up to the main switch, and that way I can connect more than one device to my NAS with a 10 gigabit connection. The Dream Machine 2nd edition will also be connected with a 10 gigabit connection to the main switch, and that way I have a nice backbone of 10 gigabit speed available for my whole home network. Okay, so this is for the cabinet right now. We will be upgrading this, and I'll show you later on how the upgrade went and how it looks. I'm starting with the upgrade of my network right now, and the first thing I need to do is to disconnect all the cabling from the current setup. I've already pulled out all the wires from the side, and now I'm going to disconnect one by one all the cabling. I'll start with all the sockets that don't have an active connection on it, and then later on I'll see what is active and what I can disconnect easily. As you can see, I've removed all the cabling. I'm gonna remove the Zeisel USB 50 first. I will replace that one with the Dream Machine 2nd edition, and that's where I start to build up the whole network again. Okay, so I've cleared out the Zywall and also the HP switch. I did it both at the same time. I thought it would be easier than first taking one out and then plugging the other one in. If I do make a mistake if it doesn't work, I have more work to put it back. But at this point, I'm still very confident. But we'll start with the Dream Machine, see how it goes, if it gets configured properly, and then we can start connecting up all the other Ubiquiti pieces of equipment because it needs the controller to actually get configured. All right, let's get going then. All right, I got the Dream Machine Special Edition here. I still need to get it out of the box, so let's do that together. It's a rack-sized machine. There's a little box in here. Drop that on the ground. And then it's actually pretty heavy. I think it's heavier than the 10 gigabit switch. So yeah, it does feel as a serious machine. Let's take all the protection of it. There you go. So it has been nicely wrapped. And there you go. This is the Dream Machine 2nd edition. You've probably seen this online already because this machine is not that new. We will be needing the main power supply, so we'll take this out. And there's a little lock in here, which is rather nice, as you can see here. And that secures the power cable. Now, this machine sits in a rack. I don't expect the power cable to come out, but you never know. So this particular unit has a 2.5 gigabit connection for the one side, It has only gigabit on the LAN side, but it does have SFP plus ports, of which you can put in a gig or a little adapter. Now I do have an adapter for the LAN side because I'm going to connect up the 10 gigabit switch with the 10 gigabit connection of this unit. So I got this transceiver module also from Ubiquiti. It is a 10 gigabit receiver, but it also supports lower speed. So it is 10, 5, 2.5, and 1 gigabit. So the ones with 10 gigabit only weren't in stock, so I went with this one. It's a little bit more expensive, but yeah, that's fine. If you have never seen one of those before, it is a like little module which you put in a switch. We'll put it in together, and on this side you have a regular Ethernet connection. You can buy these as fiber as well, but I don't have any fiber in the house, so that there's no point there. Okay, so I'm gonna put in the transceiver over here. The bottom port is the 10 gig SFP plus port, so let's put it in there. Now I have to see what side it goes in. I think this is correct. So when I plug it in, it gets snug in there. If you want to take it out, you have to pull this thingy up, and then you can take it out again. But it's actually is locked in at that point. Okay, what's else in the box? Because I'm actually going a little bit fast here on that part of the action. We get a power cord. This is a special one, as you can see. It has a little locky thing, or the little, how would I call this, a little gap here where the lock fits in. It's also a special cable. We also have, of course, the brackets, since we want to put this into the server rack. So we're going to need those. And luckily they provide us with all kind of screws. So all kind of accessories, which I always find really nice with Ubiquiti. They always provide nice laid out screws in their packaging, which makes it more convenient to install stuff. Also for when I do this for clients, it's easier to get organized. So I got the 4 bolts here and some screws to connect those little brackets on, and I'll do that right now. So probably the most satisfying thing in the whole project is peeling off these little protection stickers. Always very satisfying. Okay, so we got the Dream Machine 2nd edition installed, and the machine is booting. It takes about 4 minutes, it says on the little screen. It's too small to see on camera. I already connected up the modem from the internet service provider. This is the trickiest part in my opinion, because I have to do a dial-up. It's not like a cable modem where you have immediately connection. It's a dial-up thing, and I'm gonna see if the Dream Machine can actually dial up properly the VDSL connection. So the Dream Machine 2nd edition didn't connect to the internet straight away, but this is expected because I work with a PPPoE connection. Luckily, it gives immediately an option to find alternative way to connect. And PPPoE is actually part of that setup. So I'm going to try it right now and see if that works. So setting up the Dream Machine was easy enough with the PPPoE connection, but it kind of didn't accept my password at the beginning. I don't know why. Did I mistype something? Or it was a bit weird the first time around, but the second time around it connected almost immediately. So I don't know if I just typed in a typo, or I did something wrong, or I'm not sure, because I copy pasted it from my password manager, but yeah, it just didn't work. Now, At this point, it did make the connection. It's already updating to the latest version right now. So this is an automatic process. In the meantime, I'll start opening the Enterprise XG24, which is the 10 gigabit switch. So while I'm waiting, I can do this. Okay. So it's been packaged virtually the same way as the Dream Machine. There's the same little box in here. And the same protection applies here as well. I would prefer if they started packaging things with paper. This is actually kind of funny. Ha, look at that. It kind of squishes together for less size in garbage, I guess. But in my opinion, they should have used paper or cardboard structures to keep these things safe. Now, this is kind of funny. Okay, so looks very similar as the Dream Machine. There's a little bit more fans in the back. Dream Machine is actually rather silent at this point. We have their connection with the lock. And then we got the 24 ports 10 gigabit switch. And then you got two SFP plus ports, which are 25 gigabit. Those are definitely for future use. I'm not going to be using those for a while, I think. But yeah, it's nice it's there. And let's put in all the side brackets and put that in the rack as well. So there's the little box with the cable, which is exactly the same as the Dream Machine. The screw thingy. And then the two brackets, which I will be screwing on straight away. I see that in the meantime the Dream Machine has actually rebooted and the console window is ready. Since I'm first setting these brackets up, I will finish that first. But I notice that it does look okay. And I will set it up with my laptop down there, which is out of view. I will set it up later on. I'll first screw this into the rack and then we'll continue. So also here the nice layout with screws. A couple of less screws, for example, or less items, I would say. The Dream Machine has some plastic add-ons to so you can put it on a desk. This is definitely for rack use. There's no special thingies for putting it on a desk. But yeah, this is rather convenient. And the screws are easily screwed in as well. Okay, that's one side done. Let's turn to the other side. I'm rather happy that the Dream Machine actually got installed because I was really, the PPPoE part was for me the biggest unknown. I couldn't find too much documentation online about it. And yeah, a lot of people have just a cable modem and they don't have any PPPoE connection anymore because VDSL is kind of outdated, I think. But for me, currently, it's the best solution. And with that, I also mean the cheapest solution. I got also a cable modem for TV and stuff like that. But for the internet, this was actually cheaper. It's kind of bizarre because when you put packages together, usually that is cheaper. but in my case, it actually was better to split them up. Okay, so that is already screwed on. There you go, and we'll put that in the rack and then I'll continue with installing. I've put in the switch in there as well now, so I have a very clean setup, black and silver, I guess. Ubiquiti is always silver. I'm gonna do the most satisfying part of the day, which is getting these stickers off. And so later on I will connect up through this SFP Plus connector to over here, a 10 gigabit connector straight into the switch. But first, I will be setting up the Dream Machine 2nd edition, and then we'll see how that goes. And once that's set up, we can start connecting up this, and then underneath my older 16-port PoE Plus switch as well. You can see that's an older model, by the way, because the older models don't have a little screen yet. It's just a LED light, and these ones do have little screens, which is convenient because you can get information on it. So you can see what the throughput is and everything like that, which I really like, those little screens. But for now, we'll leave it as they are because we got to set it up through the computer. All right, it's going pretty good. I got all my access points connected, and the last one is still updating. I got my special VLAN for TV, which I didn't mention in the previous section, but I have a special VLAN for TV. So I got a VLAN especially for TV. That is working. I got my 10 gigabit connection running between the Dream Machine and the 10 gigabit switch. I got a 1 gigabit connection running from the Dream Machine to the 16-port PoE switch. Now, I did find a snag in this setup, and basically the Dream Machine doesn't support link aggregation. Now, I was kind of in my head, I assumed that it would be working because there is like a 2.5 gigabit connection from the one side as a standard port. And yeah, I would assume then that 2 1 gigabit connections could be link aggregated. So I have to connect this up to a 1 gigabit connection. What I could do, obviously, is to do a link aggregation between the 10 gigabit switch and the PoE switch. But for the time being, I'm not going to do that because, well, there's no point. The internet is not that fast here. I don't have a gigabit internet running at this point. So for this setup, it's okay. I could change it in the future, obviously. If I get faster internet speeds, then I could sacrifice 2 ports from the 10 gigabit switch for this. But at the moment, I'm trying to keep as many ports free as possible so I can connect actually real 10 gigabit devices there. The upgrade went reasonably well. I got all Ubiquiti devices connected, so there's 3 access points, 2 switches, and the Dream Machine. Also, the smaller devices that are in the house, like Apple TV or the TV set, and the TV boxes, setup boxes, are all connected. So everything seems to work. I've tested everything out, and there you go. So upgrading isn't all that bad. And I must say it went rather smooth. Definitely because now I have one system going on, which is all Ubiquiti, while before I had like Zyzel, I had HP, I had Ubiquiti, I had a special controller on a Raspberry Pi device. So it wasn't that convenient to organize. Now I have the Dream Machine, which actually is the master of all the other machines, and I get one nice big overview. One of the benefits with a new network is that I got a lot more diagnostic reports. So I can see where the traffic is coming from, where it's going to. I did have that with the Zyzel as well a little bit, but it was a little bit more clunky. Now we have a really nice interface. It's much more modern, and it has very good reporting tools. One of the other benefits by changing the network is that I also changed cabling, and not just the cables themselves, but also the cable colors. So now I have a much better overview in what is connected to the patch panels. For example, I've used green for access points. I've used orange for interlink between switches. The red one is actually going to the internet. And then I got a couple of blue and black ones. The black one is the NAS. The blue one is a printer and the server. So those are devices that are necessary for the network. So that way you can organize your network much better, and in one view you can see what device is connected to what port. And that, when you open your cabinet, that is so much easier. So I think my cabinet looks way cleaner now. I'll show you a before and after image. This is the before. And this is the after. So as you can see, it's a lot cleaner. There's way less cables that weren't in use anymore, which were connected to the patch panel because I have a lot of ports in the house. But there's a lot of devices that went over to Wi-Fi and don't use cables anymore. So I've removed all the redundant cabling and I just kept all the cables that are really necessary. And so now my cabinet is nice and clean again. I got rid of the Raspberry Pi, which is on top of my modem there. And I can repurpose that Raspberry Pi now for doing other stuff, which is great. Okay, that's it for upgrading this part of the network. Okay, so everything is installed, everything is running, and I did my first tests, and they're really promising. So to recap, I have a 2.5 gigabit PC, I got a 2.5 gigabit iMac, and I got a 10 gigabit MacBook Pro. So I ran a couple of tests with the Blackmagic disk speed test. For the 2.5 gigabit connections, I could completely saturate the network. So that gave me up to 170, 180 megabytes per second. Now that is 100 megabytes per second more than my directly attached storage of the MacBook Pro. So that is definitely a nice improvement. That gives me the ability to edit a couple of 4K streams. Now for the MacBook Pro, which is a 10 gigabit connection, there I saw that the disk is actually the limiting factor here. So the network connection is way fast enough to get me all the speed from the disk. Now, if I have short bursts, I actually manage to saturate the connection, but if you have larger data files, it dropped down to the maximum speed of the disk itself, which is an SSD, and it was about 450 megabytes per second, I think. Since it has a cache, it managed to actually use that cache and get me small bursts of 1.2 gigabyte per second. Now, it's only from a single SSD. If I would put like an SSD in a RAID 0 or RAID 1, I probably get way better speeds. But for now, this is enough for me, and I can edit multiple 4K streams. So in the beginning, I asked questions, do you really need 10 gigabit Ethernet? Well, if you're just surfing the web and you're putting some data on a NAS and you don't need that real-time connection, then 1 gigabit Ethernet is still quite good. Now, obviously, if you work with a lot of people in one place, then that 1 gigabit connection might get saturated. But if you work alone, I think for most stuff that is good enough. Even for 3D work, that is very reasonable. Now, for video editing, where you need like quick streams of data where you can scrub to your timeline, there you definitely need to get faster speeds. Now 2.5 is nice, 5 is better, and I think to be future-proof you should go to 10 gigabit Ethernet. Now with the Ubiquiti equipment that I got, I thought it was reasonably affordable. Obviously, if you have to pay over €1,000 for a switch, that is expensive. But if you get like 24 ports of 10 GBE, that, in my opinion, is very reasonable. So one of the things that I like to say about Ubiquiti is that with the Dream Machine, you do get a very nice system where everything is centralized, where you can update all your equipment in one place. Also, the access points were updatable by the unified system in the Dream Machine. So that's the end of this video. If you like this kind of content, please do subscribe. I try to get to those magical 1,000 subscribers. So if you want to support me, hit that subscribe button and I will appreciate that a lot. If you do have questions, please put comments below and I'll try to answer them as soon as I can. That can be questions about the equipment or about networking, anything you like. If you just like the video, you can put a thumbs up and I will appreciate that a lot as well. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.